Step on up, sit down, twist off that bottle top or crack open that can, and welcome to Porch Matters. This is Terry Cagle coming to you from my back porch. Yes sir, yes ma'am, the name of this show is authentic. On Porch Matters, our saying is this: big issues or just a friendly conversation. No topic is off limits. We take pride in being able to talk about anything with each other in an open discussion. Open discussion is one of the only ways to learn. Your perspective could be changed. You could change the perspective of others. Friends and family, welcome to another episode of Porch Matters. I'm glad you're here. I hope you have had a great couple of weeks since the last episode. Yesterday, I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the new Protective Stadium in Birmingham to watch the UAB Blazers take on the Rice Owls. It was a very good game, very heartbreaking at the end, but congratulations to the Rice Owls for a good game, and as well as the UAB Blazers. Protective Stadium is a very nice stadium, and it was also announced that UAB will be joining the American Athletic Conference, so congratulations to the UAB Blazers. Congratulations also to my beloved Alabama Crimson Tide, who beat the Tennessee Volunteers yesterday. I hope all my fellow Bama fans enjoyed their cigars last night. Tennessee fans, hold your head up high. Your program is definitely headed in the right direction. One thing I did not enjoy Saturday was the car I was driving being hit by someone who was either drunk or texting while driving, and then them stomping on the gas and leaving the scene of an accident. Yep, that happened. Luckily, everyone in the car with me was okay. Luckily, the car is still drivable. Public service announcement, folks. Be smart if you're behind the wheel. Moving on. Halloween will come and go before I have the chance to talk to you again. Halloween is my second favorite holiday. I hope everyone has a great holiday weekend full of candy, horror movies, and fun. If you haven't seen Halloween Kills yet, I strongly suggest it. I sat and watched it. Very good movie. At least I thought it was. Some people thinks it's trash. Hello, Tammy. I'm talking about you. But I thought it was good. On this episode, Robert Dominguez of the Bigfoot Club podcast joins me on the porch to talk a little bit about Sasquatch and paranormal investigation and a lot more. Something else was mentioned in this conversation, and I really would like for you, the listeners, to give me some feedback on it. If Porch Matters t-shirts were available, would you want one? Think about it and let me know on social media, please. Robert is a great guy, and I really enjoyed this conversation. Hopefully, it's the first of many. We just scratched the surface on stuff that we can talk about. Without further ado, let's get started. Robert Dominguez, Bigfoot Club. Welcome to the porch, my friend. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing great. I'm honored to be on this show. I've been listening to your show, so I really appreciate you even asking me to be on it.
Honor's all mine, my friend. I'm a fan of your show as well, and we'll get to that here in just a second. How have you been doing lately?
This has been one heck of a year for me. And it's kind of odd because a lot of my listeners don't even know what's going on because I haven't posted a show since early May, and I've got quite a bit of sickness. It's not COVID, but a lot of sickness, and because I know you and we talked off show,
yes,
prior to recording of this show, but I had some cancer issues earlier in the year, and I had that taken care of, and in the process of doing that, I guess during surgery I got a bacteria called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And anybody that knows Guillain-Barré, if your listeners don't know what it means, it's actually a bacteria that makes your immune system attack your nervous system. So you're pretty much all your muscles turn into atrophy. And I've actually had to learn how to walk, how to move my arms and legs all over again.
Anything with a name that almost sounds like Green Beret has got to be vicious.
Yes. And Terry, this is something that I do not wish upon my worst enemies.
Understand.
I mean, this thing was so severe that, because at the time that we didn't know what it was, and it was crawling up my body, and the hospital didn't know what was going on. And it actually stopped my heart.
Wow.
For 7 minutes.
Wow.
So they actually performed CPR on me, and they brought me back to life. They put a ventilator on me. I was in a coma for 2 days, and they couldn't figure out what what was wrong with me. So it was pretty bad. And I've recently, I know since we talked, I'm actually walking on a cane now. So
that's awesome.
Prognosis is good. I've been busting my butt, doing physical therapy, occupational therapy. It seems like that's all I'm doing is just exercising and then setting up doctor's appointments. So I've been doing that.
Just from the conversations that me and you've had, and this is just my prediction, you can write it on the wall or you can just take it however you want to. But given your drive, I figure you'll be running inside of 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the whole goal. Cause like I love being inside. I love, taking it easy, but man, I'm chomping at the bit to get out and do stuff. So it's killing me a little bit, but
you got cabin fever and
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
I guarantee you do. Well, let's tell the folks a little bit about yourself other than your sickness. And I am very happy that you're coming through this. And just like I said, you're on the uphill swing. And I think you're going to be right as rain here in the next 6 months.
Roger that.
Where were you born? Where do you live? You live in Texas, right?
Correct. Yeah. I was actually born in Dallas. Grew up in a area of Dallas called Oak Cliff, really, really rough neighborhood. I was seven I was the seventh born. And so I was the baby of the family. And a lot of times, growing up in a rough neighborhood, you either got, beat up in the streets or you got beat up by your brothers. So,
right.
So that's probably it kind of toughened me a little bit, being the seventh born and getting picked on a lot. But, hey, it whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So grew up in Oak Cliff, went, like any person, go to work. And one day I was just typing on, and like I'm real guilty of this, typing on the internet at work, Bigfoot. So I type in Bigfoot and pops up, articles and stuff like that. So I don't know, at a really young age also, I've always been interested in Bigfoot. So, but it's just, something that I've always been really, really passionate about is just Bigfoot. And eventually I got into paranormal. We can get onto that as well. But yeah, just growing up, I just really enjoyed, like that subject of Bigfoot and the paranormal, but more so Bigfoot.
I've always been interested in things bigger than me. So Bigfoot's always fascinated me too.
So you're what? Like 6'7"?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sure am. Anything crypto.
Yeah.
Stuff like that has always fascinated me. Things like that I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that makes me think, I like.
Right.
So you just told us how you was flipping through work and everything one day and you stumbled upon Bigfoot. What kept you interested in the subject of Bigfoot?
Well, like I was saying, I typed in Bigfoot at work, and then what popped up was the Newcomerstown, Ohio Bigfoot Conference. And it was, I think that was like the 10th or the 11th annual one. And there was a guy on there, was wearing a cowboy hat. His name was Luke Gross. And he was there for some reason. It had his name. He was from Texas, had his email. And so I emailed the guy. I said, contribute in Bigfoot here in Texas. Cause I didn't even think about Bigfoot's being in Texas or anything like that. I just thought it was like Canada, Pacific Northwest and stuff like that. So I emailed the guy. He emails me back like right away, said he's going to be in Missouri doing some Bigfoot stuff. And he would, whenever he got back in a couple of weeks, he'd contact me. So the guy contacts me like 2 weeks later. We talk on the phone for 4 hours. We just talk about Bigfoot. And long and behold, he was telling me that Bigfoot exists in East Texas. And I was like, I was my jaw dropped. I go, what? No way. And like, sure enough, he would tell me, and he goes, hey, whenever you want to go out, I'll take you out. We'll go look at stuff. So after that conversation, he decides to form Texas Bigfoot Research Center in North Texas. And so I was lucky to be a part of the 12 original members for Texas Bigfoot Research Center. There are no longer actually a group. They've changed the name. They're now the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, I think. I'm probably getting that wrong, but that's the name of the group, NOAC or something. I don't know. But I was with the group, and we end up, getting the group up together, and we divvied like responsibilities within the group, and we got a website up and going, and we were like really busy. We started getting website, sighting reports like in East Texas and stuff like that. So I got to go out and interview tons of people and talk to lots of people, and just like, because at that time we were really into like gathering information and just try to prove that this animal exists. And so that was like part of like the big part of my early years. So that's kind of what I was just passionate about,
Okay, you were going out and you were interviewing people.
Uh-huh.
Did any of them have any evidence to back up their case as in physical? Did they have hair? Did they have footprints? Did they have, I don't know, audio recordings?
Right.
Anything tangible that could back up their story? Also, did everybody's stories kind of sound similar?
A lot of people who did contact us, and it's kind of sad to say, a lot of people who did contact us were usually people like housewives, siblings like within the family,
right?
Who I guess family members or spouses who didn't believe them. And so whenever they reached out to us, we were like their last resort, because a lot of them would contact, local authorities, and they would get ridiculed. And so whoever came to us was usually didn't have any evidence. So they would just have claims. And so we would go out and try to prove these claims. So a lot of times we did collect, hair, we did collect footprints, and we would put up cameras. And we would get very little to any evidence at all. We later learned, and we can talk about this later, but putting up cameras, and a lot of people who don't know about Bigfoot, or even hunters, hunters have this thing called game cams. I don't know if you're aware of that. Game cams come out. Yes. And you put those out, and that has like infrared beam that if it's struck, it takes a picture.
Absolutely.
And so we were putting these out in the like early 2000s, and we wouldn't get any kind of evidence at all. And so eventually, this buddy of mine, because like at the time in 2000, the early like 2001, these game cams were really expensive,
mm-hmm.
And so I had this buddy that had a game like a regular camcorder,
right?
That had like a VHS in there or something. And if we didn't have game cams, we would like just take that in the woods and stick it like in a nook of a tree. And we would go back later on and look at the video, and we would find that a lot of Bigfoots would, sense a camera or just see a camera, and they would throw sticks and rocks in front of it to see if it would like set off a flash. And so they would avoid these cameras completely. So anytime someone had a Bigfoot sighting that had, they were concerned about their family or their children and stuff, we would tell people after a while, put up game cams. If you don't want to see a Bigfoot, put up game cams, and this Bigfoot would like avoid it and go a different direction. And so that was a theory that in the early 2000s that we would like talk about, but no one was actually wanted to talk about it. I don't know why, but that's what I ended up using. I would just carry with me. I said, okay, if you want to get rid of a Bigfoot, you would just put up game cams, and they would like avoid them and stuff. And to answer your second question about some of the stories sound similar. There's a portion of Texas that I was going to a lot, which is, I'll just say it out. I'm not part of any group, so I don't care about, protecting like a area, but I would go out to Paris, Texas, and that's Lamar County. and it's right near the Red River.
Right.
And it's right near the Kiamichis. It's right near Pat Mays Lake. It's right near Camp Maxie. And Camp Maxie is like a tank, like a army tank area. And so it's a big area. It's a big area. And so I would go out there. I went out there one time, and this is like before the internet, Terry. This is like before like DSL. We would go out there with flyers and cards and stuff. And so we would go out to like Paris, Texas. And this one guy he worked at the Campbell Soup Factory. He was a security guard, and he contacted us that a Bigfoot was coming behind the Campbell Soup Factory and rummaging through dumpsters. And so by the time us group as a TBRC made it out there to go talk to him, he kind of clammed up and didn't want to talk to us and, told us to get off property. So we already made it all the way out there to Paris. I said, let's not leave. Let's go around, just talk to people and just see if we can, knock on some doors or at least get people interested in talking about the subject of Bigfoot. So we would go around, hand out flyers and stuff. And so a lot of times in Paris, I would get the same sighting report. I met up with this one guy, and I think I was at Walmart. I was getting water, and this guy walks up to me. And this is a funny story. He walks up to me, and he was a white guy, and he saw that I'm clearly Spanish. Spanish guy. So he walks up to me. So he walks up to me. He goes, "Hey, you're Spanish, right?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Do you live here?" I go, "No." And he walked off, and I go, "Rude," and he walked off. And so a week later, I made it back out to Paris to continue talking to people and see if I can gather information or like intel. Saw the same guy at a gasoline station. So I walked up to him and go, "Hey, man, did you find any Mexicans?"
Did he? I was excited. Did he ask you if you were Spanish?
He didn't. Like I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, do you find any Mexicans?" And he put his head down and he goes, "Man, I'm sorry. That was really rude with me last week, wasn't it?" I go, "Oh, just, oh, well." And he goes, "Well, you guys work really hard. And I hired a group to cut down trees and they quit on me. And, and I couldn't get them back out. So I hired a second group and they quit on me." I go, "Why? Why did they quit?" He says, "I don't know. They were shouting something, Rojo Chango. And Rojo is red. Chango is monkey." And I said, "Can I talk?" I go, "Can I talk to this guy?" And he goes, "Yeah." So he gave me the number, called the guy, and he eventually told me that they were cutting like trees down near Pat Mays Lake to, I guess, do a clear cut for this guy so he can, build a property there or something. A red Bigfoot came out of the woods and was throwing rocks at them, like big rocks, big boulder rocks at him, and it scared both the groups out. So that story kind of caught me, and I wasn't even looking for that story, Terry. And about 2 weeks later, I was at Pat May's boat ramp entrance just with a parabolic dish, just listening. Parabolic dish is like a listening device that listens really carefully, like into the woods.
Right. For
your listeners who don't know. And I was just sitting there with a colleague, and we were just sitting there just listening. This guy pulls up in I think a RV, and he comes out and he's crying. And I go, "What the heck's going on here?" So we had some coffee. So we went over there and we offered the guy coffee and see what's going on. And he was crying and went on about, his dog was killed. I said, "What happened? Did it get shot or something?" He goes, "Man, you're not going to believe me." I go, "Try me." And he says,
right.
He goes, "A red orangutan killed it." I go, "What?" And he told me that he was going out with a walk for his dog. His dog, he was walking his dog without a leash, and it took off down the woods. And a red Bigfoot picked it up, tore it in pieces
just
in front of him.
In half?
Yeah, just picked it up, ripped it in half.
Wow.
And so within 3 weeks, I got 2 stories that were probably the same Bigfoot, a red Bigfoot. So, I do get some stories like that.
Now, you mentioned the red Bigfoot. How many, in your experience and in your knowledge, how many different color variations of Bigfoot are there?
I've gotten sighting reports from Bigfoots that are black, Bigfoot that are brown, Bigfoot that are long, stringy hair that are beige. I even got one story that the lady thought a Bigfoot was wearing a top coat. I know that one kind of got me going as well. So I go, "You sure?"
I'm sorry. That was funny.
So I was telling her, I said, "Are you sure it wasn't like matted hair or like mud on it?" Because no, it was a top coat. I go, "Okay, I'm going to go with that." But I've had. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, I've had different colors. I've had them with short hair. I've had them with long hair. I've had them that look like apes. I've had them look like homeless people, like hairy homeless people, but tall. And so I've had different stories from different people, and it's to be honest, it's very fascinating to me. I always got fascinated with Bigfoot's, not that the sighting, but their behavior. Like I've had some stories of them, like how they act when someone sees them. And I had one story. This one lady saw a Bigfoot crossing the road, and when she realized what it was, she gasped. She gasped and what it was, and this Bigfoot mimicked her. It did the same thing, same facial feature, and it gasped too, and then just took off. And so stuff like that always interests me. So, I get probably like 20, 50 sighting reports of a Bigfoot crossing the road, and people don't see its face or whatever. I go, okay, that's cool. So I go check it out. But the ones that always intrigue me are the ones that have behavior, because you can't duplicate that. You can't think that up, and to me, that always solidifies that that's our actual sighting report.
And just the little research that I've done, I'm no expert or anything. It's just a hobby.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, Bigfoots tend to congregate more around bodies of water.
Correct. Yes. I tell people that all the time, man. And people tell me, how do I look for a Bigfoot? How do I look for a Bigfoot? And I always say, if there's big game there, then there's going to be Bigfoot. If there's creeks, there's lakes, there's rivers, there's tributaries,
swamps.
If there's anything, there's swamps. Bigfoots are going to be there. And a lot of Bigfoot researchers don't say this, Terry, but the big thing about Bigfoot stuff, if you really want to find a Bigfoot, you look for bodies of water, just like you said, but you also look for gas right of ways and electrical right of ways. And these are areas that the county clear cuts an area for electrical lines and gas lines. And so Bigfoots use this as a sidewalk through the county. And so if you want to find a Bigfoot, chances are they're walking, and then game's walking through there too. So if game's walking through there, for sure Bigfoots are walking through there. So I find footprints, hairs, tree breaks, all in this area constantly, all the time.
You mentioned earlier about how you ask about if they've seen their faces or not.
Right.
The ones that you've talked to that have seen a face, how do they describe it?
One of on our podcast, there's a story. There's a story we talk about. His name, I call him John Doe because he doesn't want to be talked about.
Right.
And he has an amazing story that happened in Longview, Texas. And he told me that, and he told me that this Bigfoot that came out and confronted him, his eyes were sunken into its head. That's what he said. And his nose was wide, its teeth were square, and it didn't have a neck, and it had a sagittal crest head, And so, and this is coming from a guy that doesn't know anything about Bigfoot, doesn't want to know anything about Bigfoot, and doesn't care to talk about it very often. So if someone who was going through this situation and explains that to me, that usually sticks at home with me big time. I said, man, this is actually a really good story. And this is a really good, it's like when he was telling me about it, you could hear the fear in his voice.
Right.
And he's a pretty big dude as well. He's thinking 6'5", 6'4", and he used to be a wrestler. Right. And this thing scared the heck out of him, and he didn't like to talk about it. And I was lucky that I got him to talk to me about 4 times about it. And I interviewed him once, on the podcast. So, but I think he's doing better. He's dealing with it better. And I think I kind of helped him a little bit on why he saw the Bigfoot and, and why he came across it. And so, cause I think he was having like night terrors, and he was just having a bad situation about it.
One of my friends up in North Alabama, he used to tell me this story about how him and a friend went up on top of a mountain, and they were just playing in the woods like kids did, or our age anyway. That's another show for another day about how kids don't play outside anymore.
Right.
But they were up there in the woods, and then all of a sudden he said he just heard a loud growl, and he turned around and he said he told me what he saw, and he described it as a very large, hairy monster basically coming at him. And he flat out said to this day his buddy will not speak of it.
Yeah.
And they won't even go to that area again because it was traumatizing to them.
Wow. Stuff like that really, really gets to me, because I was kind of wondering why, because I always think all the time, why would a Bigfoot confront somebody, or why would a Bigfoot growl at somebody? They're either moving young, or these kids were probably in their way of like a food source.
Right.
That's usually the reason why, because like Bigfoots, they avoid people like the plague, and if they confront you, that's usually the reason why, because like I said, food source, or they're moving young.
So it's not anything to do with being territorial.
They are very territorial, but if I all the sighting interviews I've done, if you're in the area and you don't leave, then they will be territorial, and they will try to get you to leave. They'll either leave or they'll make you leave. And so a lot of times you won't even know that they're there at all. And like it took me like 5 months. Like once I got those, like I was talking about those stories in Paris, it took me 5 months to get anybody to talk to me. And it took 5 months probably for a Bigfoot to get close enough for me to even hear it, like walking through the woods or growling at me or whistling or hooting. It took a while. So, I mean, not that everybody would, cause like a lot of people want to go out and see, go see Bigfoot. And I said, well, you got to be careful what you wish for, cause you might get it. But a lot of people that go out looking for Bigfoot probably won't find it unless it wants you to see it and wants you out of the area. So, I don't know. I wouldn't say these kids were lucky. These friend of yours was lucky, but they were in an area they weren't supposed to be. So
I know you operate mainly out of Texas, but where else do you investigate and or interview people from?
I've interviewed people as far as like the Pacific Northwest, but I've actually moved to Oklahoma for a couple of years, and I researched a lot through Oklahoma. There's a lot of sightings in Oklahoma. I've been in Arkansas. I've been in Louisiana. I've been in North Carolina. I've been in the great state of Ohio. And I think that's all the states I've been in doing Bigfoot stuff.
Little off subject, but you moved from Texas to Oklahoma. Isn't that heresy in the state of Texas?
It is like for Texas OU. It is.
You didn't get outcast, did you?
I did
excommunicated.
I did for a little bit. Yeah. Growing up, Terry, I was an SMU fan. I was like my father worked at Texas Stadium, and we're getting off subject a little bit, but
we'll get back.
He worked at Texas Stadium, and he worked a lot of hours. And so a lot of times I wanted to be with my dad.
Right.
And so he would just take me to Texas Stadium and just sit me in the stands on Saturdays and, give me popcorn and a Pepsi, and he would go work. And I would watch Eric Dickerson and what's his name? Craig James.
The Pony Express.
Yes. My favorite quarterback of all time is Lance McElhaney. And I love that guy.
That was one of the best. That was one of the best offenses I've ever seen in my life.
It was. And I was just a kid watching it. And
people want to talk about all of these split formations and everything else. No, you want to see great offense. You put Mr. McElhaney, Eric Dickerson, and the rest. And I can't remember his name now.
Craig James.
Yes. You put them in the backfield and just let them run the option on you all day.
Yeah.
Wow. What an offense.
And so that's who I really idolized growing up was SMU. So, people gave me a hard time about Texas OU, but I didn't. I go, okay.
It's a shame that program got the death penalty, and that will be the absolute only one that ever got it. Yeah. Because that death penalty killed the Southwest Conference.
It did. I was pretty heartbroken after that. Funny story is that like years later, as a adult, I was working for a security company in downtown Dallas, and it was for this condominium like high rise. And there was a guy that was working there. I won't say his name, but he was working there, and he used to be a SMU cheerleader.
Right.
And so he would come in all the time. He was like in his 60s already. And so he was coming in, and I was talking to him all the time. And I would tell him that Lance McElhaney was my favorite quarterback. And so one night he came in late, and he drove in, and I had valets that were moving cars and stuff. And long and behold, the guy gets out of the car, the resident there, and Lance McElhaney comes out.
Really?
And he introduced me to him because this is Lance. For Lance, this is Robert. And I was like, I couldn't even talk. I couldn't even talk. And so he gave me a signed copy of the SMU season DVD and just signed it. And we talked for like 20 minutes. And I was like, oh man, I was high. I was on cloud nine. So that was pretty good.
He was an absolute magician with a football.
He was. And I was always wondering, why didn't he get drafted? But as I got older, I realized, okay. But
he was too small, and the NFL wouldn't run him the option.
Yeah,
that was it right there. If the NFL would have been running the option, why wouldn't you had him on the field?
Yeah, yeah. I loved him, but I know we kind of got off a little bit, but
that's all good. We'll get back to going back to Sasquatch. I mean, but yeah, that just hit me going from Texas to OU or to Oklahoma.
That was actually, I moved to Texas to Oklahoma because I was, and I talk about this on my podcast. I wanted to start a magazine called Bigfoot Magazine. And I had a buddy of mine that lived up in Tulsa, and he was equally interested in Bigfoot. And he does his own podcast called Bigfoot Crossroads. It does great. And
I'll check that out.
Yeah, he's got great stories on there. And I moved up there to be with him, and we wanted to collaborate and start a magazine, Bigfoot Magazine. And it didn't turn out where I wanted to. And at the time I was really young, was like in my early 20s, and I was like anybody, I was just immature about stuff, and it just never came about. So I dedicated a whole podcast to that. And like, I was owning up to, okay, I messed up. I did this wrong, and it's my fault. And it was, and I had to take credit for being successful, and I had to take credit for being a failure. So I failed at that, which I kind of needed to do. And that what led me to Bigfoot Club podcast. So I think if I'd have got Bigfoot Magazine up and going, I probably would have never done Bigfoot Club podcast. So,
well, I see an opportunity there to be able to do both. If you want to, we could possibly talk about that off air. But
yeah,
if you were to try and redo the magazine in a modern day, could you do it? And do you think it would be successful? Because
I think it would too. I think it would be closer to an app than it would be a magazine. And so, but at the same time, I may do that with Bigfoot Club podcast. So I may end up doing it with that. So, I got, like, for the podcast, I'm pretty happy for not doing a podcast in a while. It's still doing well. It's still download. I still get quite a bit of downloads, and it's not super popular, but it's not super dead either. So I'm pretty happy where it's at for not, producing material right now. So
going back to a question that I had based off of what you just said, you talked about the different places that you had went.
Mm-hmm.
What are the differences between the Sasquatch that is seen in Texas versus the ones that have been seen up in the Northwest? Because those are the ones that usually get all the popularity.
Yeah.
The size difference?
Yes.
Hair color difference, everything like that.
Yeah.
Talk about the differences between them, please.
The Bigfoots, like in the Pacific Northwest, are told to be anywhere between 8 to 14 feet tall. Jesus. And anywhere between 300 and 800 pounds. That's the guesstimate, people guessing on its weight and its height.
I was a fat boy.
the ones here in Texas are anywhere between 6 to 7 feet tall and closer to 350 to 400 pounds. And the ones here in Texas are all the ones that I've talked to people on. They're very aggressive and very territorial. The ones in the Pacific Northwest, if you're talking like British Columbia or Vancouver or like Washington State, it's my theory that most of the Bigfoots there don't get to see a lot of people, and so they don't know how to react to people, and they'll either leave or just go. But the ones here in Texas, I think a lot of them are getting there's a lot of growth in a lot of communities, and it's pushing them out, and so a lot of them tend to get very aggressive and very territorial. So that's what I'm getting. I haven't done a ton of research recently because I've kind of moved toward mostly podcasting now. But if someone were to come out and ask me for help, I would help them. But the last time I was doing probably research was probably like 2017. And I was, getting sighting reports, and I was like responding to people. But those were the last ones I was getting. They were very aggressive. So
what do you think a Sasquatch is?
I knew you were going to ask me that question.
Well, I mean,
no, it's fine. It's fine.
It's a question that you'll hear all the time in this subject matter, because as much research and as much sightings as everybody sees, it does nothing but bring up more questions than it does give answers.
It does. And it's like, when I first got into Bigfoot in 99, 2000, and I was helping TBRC get off the ground, my mentor, Luke Gross, he was sold on flesh and blood. It's flesh and blood animal. It was a primate. It was a missing link, or however you want to think of it, as an ape. And so that's what he just pounded that in our heads. And that's what I always thought. I eventually left TBRC because I didn't like where it was going. So I left, started doing stuff on my own, started researching on my own, started talking to people. Because whenever you're with a group, Terry, it kind of like limits you on what you can do, where you can go, who you can talk to. And so once I broke away and started talking to people, I started talking to Native Americans. I started talking to, older elderly folks, and a lot of them, especially like the Native Americans, actually believe that this is a spiritual animal, and that it could disappear. It can, some people say cloaking, or, open up a portal hole or a wormhole, however they want to do it. And they just disappear, and they can't be seen. And then I was interviewing this one guy, and this thing always stuck to me, Terry. It always stuck to me so hard. But he said this thing was so massive, and it just stepped into the woods. And so he said, as soon as this thing stepped into the woods, he said, it's like the woods swallowed it up. And he goes, this thing was so massive. And it looked like a bulldozer with like two legs. That's what he said. It would look like a bulldozer with two legs.
Jesus.
And then once it stepped into the woods, it was like hiding behind skinny trees, and you couldn't see it. And so
How is that possible?
I know it always stuck with me whenever he said that. I said, he didn't have a motive. There was nothing. He was just a scared guy that saw this Bigfoot. And once he told me that, it stuck with me. I said, man, maybe there is something spiritual. Maybe there's something like mystical with Native Americans and like its land. And so I stay open with it. So I know I'm not really answering your question, but for the longest time, I thought it was flesh and blood. And there's like, it just avoids drones. I'm sure satellites can get it, but there's no proof on that. But I'm pretty sure that this is something that we just can't explain why we can't see it, and why we can't capture it on at least video or cameras. So, and every time I run into somebody that has a camera view of it and I want to see it, they like deny me. I don't know why, but it always happens that way.
As often and for however many years that we've been hearing about it,
Mm-hmm.
to go along with your flesh and blood thing, everything that lives must die.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fact of life. It's part of the circle of life that we learned from the Lion King.
Mm-hmm.
Remains have to be around somewhere.
Yeah.
We would somewhere along the way, we would have stumbled upon a bone, or we would stumbled upon a skull. So, you would think.
Yeah. That's actually a great point. That's a great point. I was at a Bigfoot conference, and I met with the late John Bendernagel. He's already passed away. He was a wildlife biologist that's based out of British Columbia, and he's well known in the Bigfoot world. And I love this gentleman. He was such a great man. I mean, I would walk up to him and I'd ask him a question or tell him something, and he would pull out a pad and pen and just write it down. I know he would never use it, but he would just write it down. And I love that about him. And so I walked up to him and I asked him that question. I said, why haven't we found bones? And he goes, Robert, that's a good question. He says, now because I've been a wildlife biologist, he goes, for over 40 years. I've never found a bear bone in the woods. And I know grizzlies and bears die, but I've yet to find bones in the woods.
That's interesting.
And I go, okay. He goes, scavengers. Scavengers, they scavenge everything and they just take it away. And I go, okay. And so when he told me that made a lot of sense to me.
And that's sense to me.
And that's usually how I answer that question, and it troubled me for the longest time too, as well. I go, I haven't even found any bones, and so, but yeah, it's an interesting subject. I just love it so much. And man,
one of the reasons why I asked that, I was listening to another show. I'll name drop it. It was Chris Jericho's podcast, and you know how he's always into different things.
I love his show.
2 or 3 years ago, he had the guy from the Sasquatch Chronicles on. I don't know if you heard that episode or not. Wes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, Wes. And shout out to you, Wes, if you're listening. Fan of your show. He told the story about how there was a couple of brothers that owned some property. I can't remember where, but there were multiple Bigfoots around the area, and they were getting to the point where they were coming up and looking in the windows and everything like that, throwing rocks at anybody that came by, making noise. And they were keeping them up all night, and this went on for months. And then they finally called someone that was religious, and they came out, or she came out, and they walked the perimeter of the property and prayed over it. I'm assuming put out either holy water or anointing oil, whichever. And then it got to the point where they wouldn't cross the property line.
That's interesting.
They would just literally throw stuff over the property line. And then Wes would tell part about how the two brothers would see this woman walk by in all white. They would holler at her, say something to her. She'd never acknowledge them at all. And it wasn't the fact it was rainy one day, but her clothes wasn't muddy, and her dress was dragging the ground. And it got to the point where one day they just couldn't stand it no more, and literally just went, hey, just yelled at her, hey, turn around, this, that, and the other. And she turned around, and they said she had the most sick, sadistic smile on her face that they had ever seen. And they told the lady that came out and prayed over the property and everything. And she said that the reason why the Bigfoot and everything was going crazy like they were was because she was there.
That is interesting. I've never heard that story.
I haven't heard that story in like 3 years, but it's one that just sticks with me because it goes against pretty much everything that I've heard when it comes to Sasquatch.
Right. That's interesting because, like, I know on our podcast we talk about because I know we hadn't really talked about it, but I do paranormal stuff too. I do. Right. I was a case director for Pentex Paranormal of North Texas for almost 10 years, and so I dealt with a lot of cases with people and needing help and stuff like that. But we always talk about on our podcast, the Bigfoot Club podcast. Bigfoots emit a ultrasound. I don't know if you were aware of that.
I'm not.
They actually emit like a ultrasound to freeze game and to strike fear into people. If people don't want to leave an area, they'll emit ultrasound. And I've heard stories about it. I've never experienced it, but I've heard stories about it. I heard people tell me that. And then I do paranormal stuff. So whenever ghosts or entities appear or manifest, they emit or they're around EMF, electromagnetic fields. And so I was interviewing somebody, and we were talking about it, and she says, "That sounds like ultrasound." What you described, how you're feeling, because like whenever you get bombarded by EMF, you get headaches. Everybody acts different to it. You get headaches, you get nausea, you hallucinate, you see stuff, and you just get jittery. And so she was explaining to me, I was explaining to her on a sighting that someone had a Bigfoot sighting, and it was everything that I was talking about this sighting had EMF as well. So that's interesting how that story, with the lady, with the entity in that area was drawn to Bigfoots, or the Bigfoots were going crazy. That is super interesting. I gotta look that up.
It was on Chris Jericho's show, and it was like 2 or 3 years ago.
Wow.
And when Wes came on for the second time, I have tried to look to find that episode again, and I hadn't been able to. I'm sure you know more about it than I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, I re-listened to that episode like 5 or 6 times, mainly for that one story.
Wow. I may do a podcast on that one.
All right.
So thanks, Terry.
You're welcome.
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Have you run into any stories where, these people seen something legit, actually had tangible evidence, and then for whatever reason weren't allowed to share it? Are you following me?
Yeah. Are you talking about evidence-wise?
Evidence-wise, as in possibly government stepping in and not letting them share anything?
Yes. There's an area in Sulphur Springs, Texas. Whenever I was first with the TBRC, we wouldn't name areas. We wouldn't say like Sulphur Springs or Hopkins County or whatever. We wouldn't do that. Right. We would call area 1, area 2, area 3 to protect it. And there was an area in Sulphur Springs, Texas, which was right next to Cooper Lake. It was called Mahoney Slabs. And it was like a bridge that had some old concrete, and the bridge wasn't there anymore, and there's like slabs there. But anyway, there was a back road that we used to take back there all the time. And once we started doing the research in the area, I think game wardens started figuring out what we were doing, because they would interview us, they would stop us and talk to us. And after about 4 or 5 months, we would go down that same back road, and all of a sudden they would just show up. And then we later found out there was a sensor on that road that would prevented us from going there. So we would go halfway down the road, and they would come like 5 minutes later and tell us we had to leave. And we were getting like calls. We were getting there was evidence of like bedding, like a Bigfoot bedding down in the area. Like it would look like a cow or a horse that would lay down in like a big tall of grass, but there's no cows and there's no horses there.
Right.
And it'd be like a big old, like a body laying down on this grass. And so we would catch that. And we were getting close, I think, to getting some evidence. And then all of a sudden these game wardens and park rangers just show up. Because game wardens and park rangers, they're not allowed to comment or discuss unclassified animals. They're just not allowed to do that. And so, after a while, they used to harass us all the time. And after a while, because I was going to school, and I had a student ID. And so I would lie. I would say that I'm there I'm writing a paper on deer migration, and that I was getting soil samples. So I would do stuff like that. So they would leave us alone, because like they like, I had another buddy that was
statute of limitations is up on this, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah. This was back in 2001. So I had another buddy that was a constable and of that one county. And so he would call us. He goes, "Hey, are you guys in town?" And I go, "Yeah." I go, "Why?" I go, "How'd you know?" I said, "Man," he goes, "There's a lot of radio chatter about you guys being here. They're talking about Bigfooters being here." And I said, "Oh, crap." And so we had to move to another area to not get harassed, because like that's what happens, and you hear stories about, Bigfoot's getting hit by trucks and trains, and then, Men in Black show up and then haul it away. So you hear the story all the time. Yeah. And I think there's a couple of stories in Texas that have that same story of a Bigfoot getting hit on a road, a windshield, and a lady going crazy about it. And then Men in Black show up and then, pull the body away. And all of a sudden the lady is, moved out of county somewhere. It happens. And so yeah, I do get those stories from time to time about that.
You mentioned how the Bigfoot is a classified animal. Why do you think it still is?
There's, like we were talking about the government, there, like in East Texas, I'll just say, for example, East Texas, because I don't know any other state. I can't compare and stuff like that. But in East Texas, there's a lot of money in lumber. There's a lot of money in lumber. There's a lot of money in, I'm just going off opinion. This is probably money like in state reps, senators, local councilmen, local people. And so if you take Bigfoot, and classify it, then you could no longer lumber in that area. And that's a lot of money. And you're messing with, a big wheel, more bigger than like myself or anybody else. So you start messing with that, man, you're going to end up in the lake somewhere.
See, I always figured it was over the fact that if people actually found out from the government that it was, as I hold up quotation marks, real.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it would create either panic or curiosity, and it would mess things up that they had laid out and planned. As I've said, as I used to wear a badge, as I'm sure you've heard in my previous podcast. I don't want to retell that story all the time, but there's one phrase that I've come to learn and appreciate: ignorance is bliss. Whenever you wear a badge, you see stuff, you hear stuff that you wish to God you really didn't know. I'm just going to leave it at that. But people who, if it's still listed as a quote myth, or if it's anything like that, people are not going to worry about it near as much.
I mean, because like the game wardens and like those guys are serious about it, man. They're serious about it because like there's supposed to be no black bear in Texas. There's black bear in Texas, but they're not allowed to talk about it or comment on it. There's panthers in Texas. I've seen footprints, but they're not allowed to talk about it. They just can't. And so Bigfoot, come on, they're not going to even talk about that at all.
No.
So, but yeah, I tend to stay away from those guys and just get out of their way. It's like, man, I don't know. I don't want to. I don't like big government. I'll just say that, Terry.
That's just like there's not supposed to be any alligators this far north, but
yeah,
in my state, especially, you're starting to find more sightings of alligators in lakes, small lakes, big lakes, and other bodies of water.
That's scary.
I know.
That's super scary. I don't like.
And I don't know why they're there.
Yeah. Exotic people or something. I don't know.
That would be my assumption. But
yeah,
other people say that they're put in there by officials to try and,
control the population
as a predator, trying to keep things in check. I don't know.
Wow.
But to me, they shouldn't be this far north.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my personal opinion, they're overrun in Florida, and there ought to be an open season on them as far as hunting goes. But
they're like protected there, aren't they? They're protected, aren't they?
I think so. I could be wrong. I haven't done any research on it, but from everything that I knew, that they were protected. That's just like in the Everglades after Hurricane Andrew came through and wiped out all those zoos and everything, and all those pythons ended up in the Everglades.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to be there.
But they're there.
And they're there. And they're big enough to choke out gators. And if they're big enough to choke out gators, they're going to hurt somebody, and they shouldn't be there.
Man,
my personal opinion.
That's scary. Hogs scare me in the woods, but if I were to see a python, that would scare me even more.
Yes. I'm not a snake guy.
I'm not either.
I don't even like dead snakes. I'm just I'm one of them. If I know it's there, I can deal with it. It's those that come out and surprise you that get Mariah Carey octaves come out of my mouth and make me run. I don't like snakes.
I remember once we were doing like an expedition in East Texas, and we were using a dried out creek bed to walk through a county, and it was dried out, and I was walking on it. I was taking point on it, so I was leading the group, and I stepped on a rock that was really wobbly, a big rock, and the guy behind me just yelled Dominguez, and I already knew what it was. Once he yelled, I just dropped my backpack, took off running, and it was a rattler. So that scared the crap out of me. And like after that, I bought big high boots for like snakes and stuff. So I learned my lesson on that one. So
you had to check your shorts too, didn't you?
I sure did. So I was gone. I was the quickest, I ran so fast with stuff in my shorts faster than I've ever done before. I'll just say that. So
yeah, copperheads are real bad around here. And I don't know if you've ever had any dealings with copperheads.
I haven't. I don't want to either.
A rattlesnake doesn't have near the attitude that a copperhead does. Them things are vicious. They're angry. They're angry all the time. It's like they feed off of hate and fear.
Yeah.
I don't like them. But I don't know how we got on snakes, but
it's okay.
But we did.
It's all right.
You mentioned earlier about how you're starting to dive into the paranormal. What led you into the paranormal?
I've always been interested in it, and it's just something that I never, because you haven't really asked me, but I grew up, Christian, and I was baptized, and I just have a strong faith belief in God and all that stuff. So
as do I.
And so I was always interested because you'd always hear stories like at church about someone being possessed or someone doing ungodly things and stuff like that. So I've always been interested in it, and like while I was doing Bigfoot stuff, and I was posting a lot of stuff on the internet and stuff like that. I got reached out by another mentor of mine, Kendall Wilkerson, and she runs Pentex, Paranormal Investigations of North Texas, and she was looking to form a group, and she's looking for seasoned researchers, and she didn't have a lot of research. There were people that researched before, and she said, "Hey, you've researched a lot in Bigfoot, and I've read everything that you were doing. I'm really impressed. I would like to recruit you. Are you interested in paranormal stuff?" And I go, "Heck yeah, I am." And so she asked me to be the case director. So I was the case director for almost 10 years. And I haven't seen a lot of stuff, but I've experienced stuff that you can't document. I've experienced stuff like, being in a house that smells like sheetrock and wet and all that stuff. Right. And all of a sudden you smell like a cigar or a perfume. There's nobody in the house. And so I've experienced stuff like that I just can't document, or you can't take a picture of or record or whatever. And I've seen a lot of stuff, and that's what kind of got me into it. And, along with the Bigfoot stuff, Terry, is that when I first got into like Bigfoot and paranormal stuff, I was into documentation and proving it exists. But after a while, I kind of started leaning toward, just helping people. Because there's tons of people that don't know where, like I was telling you before, they can't go to their spouse, or they can't go to, family members that don't believe them. And it's either paranormal or Bigfoot stuff. And they just need someone to talk to or just listen to them. And I found that way with like the paranormal. So the paranormal right now, I'm currently not researching anything right now because I'm still recovering from Guillain-Barré, but people still reach out to me, and I find groups for them or just individuals that can help them. And so that's where I kind of lean toward the paranormal and Bigfoot. I love helping people. I love to be that conduit or that venue for them to help them. So I know you didn't ask me all that, but
nice. Talking about Bigfoot as well as the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
What are the similarities between the two other than you being able to help people?
The similarities is, I guess the thrill of the unknown. That's always been a passion thing of mine. It's like I have buddies now that just tell me, "Why do you do both?" I can barely handle one, and you're doing both. I said, I'm curious about the unknown. I'm curious about, just learning more. And once you're able to learn more, then you can pass it on to someone else.
Absolutely.
And so that's the big drive with me. I don't take money. I don't take fees. I don't do any of that stuff. I do it for like the pure passion and the pure, just to help people. And anybody that says, hey, I can get rid of a Bigfoot, or hey, I can get rid of a demon, or, a ghost entity, but you have to go to my, my PayPal. Run as far away as you can, because those people are not in it for you, and you shouldn't even talk to them. But that's my input on that. So,
what, other than the story that you told me earlier about the red orangutan,
mm-hmm.
what is the best story that you've heard as far as the Sasquatch is concerned?
Like funny story, or you're talking about funny story, or just amazing story?
Amazing story.
Okay,
I'll listen. You tell whatever you want to.
Okay, I'll tell you both. I'll tell you both.
Okay, good. That's what I was fixing to ask.
Okay,
we're on the same page here.
The funny story was, I was and this, whenever I was with the TBRC, we would get sighting reports out of state. We would get stuff like from Kentucky, your state, Missouri, Mississippi, and stuff like that. And I got one from Kentucky of a lady, and we end up doing a conference call. And then she emailed us, and then within the subject line, it said, Bigfoot wants to have sex with me. Yeah, that's what kind of got me too as well. So we end up calling this lady, and it was like me, and it was like Luke Gross, and somebody else. I can't remember who it was, but we called this lady, and we were all asking her questions. And then she said that, yeah, Bigfoot, he wants to have sex with me. It comes down the mountain and he wants to have sex with me. And I go, how do you know he wants to have sex with you? And she said, well, when it comes down the mountain, it's after dark, and I could see its penis glowing. And I go, okay. And after I got off the phone call with her, I talked to Luke Gross.
I'm sorry.
I know. It's okay. It's okay. I talked to Luke Gross, my mentor, and I said, is that possible? How's that possible? He says, well, Bob, there are some phosphorescent mushrooms. Bigfoot could get his hands on it and then, go down there. And I go, okay. So that was pretty funny. And I was like, I think I tell that story on any podcast I actually come on, but that one always gets to me like really, really, really bad. So the most amazing story I probably ever did was, I can say the name of this lady because she's actually on the TBRC website. So I can actually say her name. Her name is Deborah Thornton, and she's probably like in her 70s now. But in the 60s, her and her boyfriend were in, I believe it was Paris, Texas, and they were driving in an area that's no longer there. There's a lake there now, Pat Mays Lake. But she was driving, and her boyfriend got a flat tire. So he decided to go into town and get a spare and come back. She didn't want to go. She stayed behind. And she was asleep in her boyfriend's truck. She was awakened by a Bigfoot pulling her out of the window, the driver's side window. And all she could see was its nipples and its penis. And that's all she said she saw. And we asked her, okay, what color is it? And she told us the color. He had pink nipples, and they were partially brown, and his penis was brown, and it was erected. And she was going into detail so much about it. And she said that she was kicking at it, and then she had like a glass Coke bottle, empty Coke bottle, and she was hitting it. It was hitting its forearms with it. And long and behold, another Bigfoot stepped out of the woods. And she said it was a female. I go, how did you know it was a female? She goes, because it had breasts and it was pregnant. And this Bigfoot was yelling at the male. And so the Bigfoot let her go and then walked into the woods. And so she later, I think when the boyfriend got back, she was like hysterical. And I think they admitted her to the local hospital there. We actually did a open records deal, and we pulled the records for that. And she was admitted to the hospital, and she did have abrasions on her ankles. It didn't say why but it just said it had abrasions. And then we try to reach out to the local authorities there and try to get the same records, and they denied us. But that was probably the most amazing story I've ever heard when it comes to Bigfoot. Because number one, it was physical. Number two, there was extra body parts that you normally don't get in like sighting reports. And then you had some kind of social communication between two Bigfoots to move on. And so to me, that's probably the most amazing story. And so we interviewed her for like 4 hours, and I think we gave her like 300 questions, and 6 of them were like redundant. And she never like fade on her story. Her story was the same. And so I thought that was probably the best story I've ever investigated.
That's interesting.
So you don't get a lot of stories about nipples and penises and stuff.
No.
So
this is a first for me.
So
awesome. What's the most interesting? Now we'll say the same thing about paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
What's the funniest story you've heard, and what's the most amazing story? Either the stories you've heard or what you've experienced personally.
The funniest. Let me see here. The funniest story I got was a gentleman. I think he was in Hugo, Oklahoma, and he was contacting me because he felt that the whole town was haunted and they were out to get him. And he said that there were witches in the town and they were shapeshifters, and they could shape into a sheriff and try to arrest him. And I really wanted to help this guy a lot. He was like, he was telling me that he was inheriting a lot of oil money and that everybody was out to get him. And I told him that I feel bad for the guy. I told him, I said, hey man, you either need to get some psychiatric help and cross that line out, and then I can go help you, whatever, if you have paranormal stuff. And so he was telling me amazing stories about witches throwing acorns on his porch. And then if he didn't notice the acorn, then he was going to have some kind of spell on him. So he was telling me stuff like that. That was pretty interesting. And I go, oh, okay, that was really, I felt bad because I wasn't able to help the guy, and I really wanted to help him.
What kind of witches were they? Did he ever?
I asked him that question and he would never answer it. He would always like go off talking about something else. And I would tell him, I said, hey, you need to focus and answer this question. So to me, he sounded like he was borderline. And when I say this, I'm not making fun of anybody. That's not my goal here.
No, but nor mine.
So he sounded like he was borderline schizophrenic. That's what it sounded like to me. And he was probably seeing things, they probably were there, but he was probably like magnifying it, And so I really wanted to help the guy, but I wasn't able to do it. Probably the most amazing story I got was there was a gentleman, I believe he was in Killeen. He was in the military, and he reached out to me, and I guess he was stationed overseas in Afghanistan, came back, and he called me from a payphone, and he was like frantic, and he told me that he got home. He got home within, I guess, a couple of days from being overseas, and that there was something in his barracks or his quarters or something. And he had a dog, and the dog was responding to somebody in his back room. So the dog went back there, was barking at something. He pulled his pistol and went to go investigate. And he said it was a shadow. It was a black shadow. And he was telling me it goes freeze. He thought it was a guy dressed all in black. This thing turned around, didn't have a face. And it said to him, "We are many," and disappeared. So the people, your listeners that listen to the read the, yeah, I could see your hair standing up. That listen to, that read the Bible. That's demon,
What he's referring to, folks, we're on a Zoom call. As soon as he said that, the hair on my arm started standing up and I got goosebumps. Yeah. And I held it up to make sure that he could see it. Yeah. Reason why I say that, my Whenever you were talking a little bit earlier about being spiritual and being around and hearing about demon possession and everything like that, I've been around it a good bit of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was born and raised in a Pentecostal church where we break out the olive oil and we pray until something happens.
Right.
Well, there was one instance whenever I was like 8 years old, and the way any of that always went down was whenever I was 9, actually, excuse me, whenever anybody came in and it was felt upon that they were possessed, for whatever reason, they always got all the children and everything out because they figured if they get the demon out, it'll go into the children or something like that.
Right.
Not saying that good, bad, or indifferent, just telling you the way it was.
Right.
My dad was a part of the group of men that were helping to pray and exorcise the demon. He would tell this gentleman, I can't remember his name, and if I did remember it, I wouldn't share it anyway. He was up from Chicago, I think, and he might have been 5'11", 6 foot, might have weighed 130 pounds soaking wet. My dad was a very large man. He was somewhere in the neighborhood of 6'3", 6'4". At his heaviest, he was over 400 pounds. He used to tell me stories about how he used to be able to take 4 bolts and everything out of a motor, reach down and just pull it out of a car.
Man.
And whenever my dad would tell me that, he would have other people around him when he told me this, and they would back up his story.
Mm-hmm.
How whenever he worked at Fruhoff building trailers, he'd reach and grab one rear end that went under a trailer, reach and grab the other one with the other hand, pick it up, and walk off with 2 rear ends. My dad was an extremely stout man.
Uh-huh.
He didn't look it, but as we say over here, it was just that cornbread strength, that raw bone.
Country strong.
Yes. Going back to the story, my dad was kind of down around his ankles and everything, trying to hold them in place in case it just went crazy. There was another gentleman I'm not going to mention his name. He was somewhere in the neighborhood of 230 to 250 on one arm. Another one was about the same size as on the other. During the whole process, Dad would tell me the story about how they would try to get the spirit or whatever to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
We or many was mentioned. And this was also around the same time frame where that very, very small man was starting to lift one of those 250-pound men off of the floor with one arm.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were there to witness this?
My dad was.
Okay.
I was in the house, but I wasn't in the room to see it firsthand.
That's something.
Do you remember the climactic scene from The Exorcism of Emily Rose, where where the spirit started talking about how they were in the garden and this, that, and the other? You know, that whole speech?
Yeah.
Yeah, my dad almost heard that verbatim one time.
Man, it's almost like they have like cue cards, you know?
Yes.
To talk to us about stuff like that. But
it was to the point where my dad had told me that enough times that whenever that movie came out and I heard it, goosebumps, and chills.
Like you were saying, whenever I was telling that story, because I was looking right at you on Zoom, and when I was telling you the story, you just did just like you just kind of like shook your head and kind of cringed your lips together and stuff. So
that's right,
man. But
my dad used to drive a truck and everything as well. And I mean, he was a very spiritual guy, constantly praying and everything like that. Anybody who's listening that knows my dad they know what I'm talking about.
Right. He sounds like a good man.
Very good. Now,
Good.
my foot is a whole lot bigger than his now, but I can't feel his shoes.
Yeah.
And he would constantly tell me stories about how little black shadows would fly in the truck with him and have a conversation with him while he was riding down the road. And they would get in it. They would start at one point, but whenever they got to the end of a town, they'd float out.
They're trying to seduce him or trying to coax him to do something he didn't want to do. You think?
Trying to talk him out of praying about a certain thing.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
That's not going to happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this kind of stuff.
Anytime something good's about to happen, that's usually what happens, Yep.
Man, so, I've legit still got goosebumps on my arms from that. I'm just telling you.
Because like I can just tell you, Terry, from my, I'm going to talk about, my condition a little bit, but when I first got Guillain-Barré, I was not in a good place. I was not in a good place spiritually, and I was breaking down and I was crying, and I was telling my best friend, I go, "This is too hard. I can't do it. It's too hard." And he was telling me because he's trying to break you. He's trying to tell you that you can't do it, but something's good's about to happen. That's why he's doing it. That's why he's doing it to you. And so I'm a firm believer that whenever something bad happens to me, like I get a setback, that means something's good's about to happen. And I just have to pray and just think about it. You know what? I'm going to pray even harder now. Should have done that. Guess what? I'm praying even harder now. So I can just tell you right now that they've told me that Guillain-Barré minimal is like a year, 2 years recovery. I'm on my 5th month and I'm walking on a cane. And so about a month ago, I was still in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't even strong enough to go to the restroom, Terry. But I can just tell you that now that I'm able to stand. Now I can't go a long way, but I'm able to walk, from here to the kitchen, from here to the bathroom, from here to the front door, to the doctor's office. But I'm getting there. I'm trying to build up stamina. So prayer does work. People don't believe it. It does work.
From me to you, sometimes, as in the instance of Job, the Lord allows things to happen to us that brings us down. But if he allows you to go down, he's going to bring you up. Only thing you've got to do is trust in him.
Yes, sir.
And you've got one heck of a story to tell, sir.
Yeah, I got some testimonials to tell and to share and stuff. So I think when this all happened, I'll say this, my family was kind of distant. And when this happened to me, it's brought us closer. And we're in touch with each other. We tell each other that we love each other and that, hey, I was thinking about you today. Hey, how you doing? Hey, how's your day? So I'm blessed to still be here. I am blessed to have that opportunity to tell my family that. So I want to say that to your listeners, to my listeners, that, prayer does work. It does work.
Absolutely.
So
it might not come in your time frame.
Right.
But it'll come.
Yes.
As long as you want it.
Man, that felt good. Because I hadn't even talked about this on my podcast yet. So that's you're getting first. So
I appreciate that.
No problem, man. No problem.
It's amazing how things like this will bring families closer together.
Yes.
And as bad as I hate to say this, sometimes we need to be brought down.
Yeah.
We need something that humbles us a little bit, because sometimes we get a little bit too big for our britches. And I'm not saying that that's your story at all. Right. I'm saying that as in a general, because even as families as well, life happens. We all got this thing to do, that thing to do. But anytime something happens like this, that'll bring you down. Number one, you find out who your real friends are. Number two, you find out who really does have your back.
Isn't that the truth? I had a couple people that were a part of my podcast that were no call, no shows. And this is nothing. I'm not belittling them or saying bad things about them. Whatever they're going through, it's on them. But when I was down and out, this person didn't show up, and she was like, no call, no show, and I was pretty hurt by it. But I forgave her. And I moved on. And so, but yeah, you it's true. You find out who your friends are and who's your family and who loves you and who's who wants to be there for you spiritually. So,
and that kind of hits close to home.
It does,
but it's the truth. And sometimes we need to be reminded that the next breath that we take, unfortunately, could be our last one.
Yeah. I mean,
and we can go all kinds of philosophical with that if you want to, but that's the truth. We don't know when our number is going to be called.
Yeah.
And we need to make the most out of this life that we possibly can. We need to be that family member that has the other one's back. We need to be able to check on our people. And by our people, I'm talking about our family and our close friends, what I call our circle.
Right. I've heard you talk about that. I've heard you talk about that on other podcasts. I like that.
I think, and that's my true belief. If we take care of our circle and everybody takes care of their circle, look how much better this world would be.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in that. I really am. Look out for your circle. And I don't know how else to put it. I really don't.
Yeah, you're totally right on that. I'm a firm believer as that as well. So, man,
to go back to your paranormal, I don't know if ghosts are real. I'm not somebody who don't believe in it. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying I've never seen one. But as far as demonic possession, I'm a firm believer in it.
Yeah.
I have actually seen it firsthand. The stories that I told you weren't firsthand stuff. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen evil dance around in people's eyes. I know it's real. If that's real, common sense tells you the yin and the yang. If that's real, heaven's real.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I'm a firm believer in that too. And like the bad thing about it, Terry, and like whenever I try to help people, I don't try to convert them or I don't try to tell them what to do with their lives or anything like that. But I give them an avenue because a lot of people that reach out to us are either non-believers or people who don't listen to the word anymore.
Right.
And they just need help. And so I try to provide that for them. And, I don't care if they're like Democrat or like Republican or whatever, I just want to help them. And
none of that stuff should matter.
No, it does not.
It shouldn't matter.
It shouldn't matter at all. So I try to just help people. And like I was saying earlier, Bigfoot Paranormal, that's my goal, is to help people and give them a voice, give them a venue, a conduit, something. So, but to get back to that story, because I know we went off a little bit, but that's okay. That's all right.
All good in the hood.
Yes, sir. That gentleman told me that, that this thing turned around and said to him, we are many, and it just disappeared. And so he left that either house or the barracks. I can't remember what it was. I'm pretty sure it was a housing, because if it was a barracks, there would be multiple people there to probably see it as well. But he left that housing unit and he called me from a payphone. And I said, okay, I could be out there in 2 days. I can drive to Killeen in like 2 days. I'll be there. And then he called me back, and then he said that, no, I can't have you come out because I can't have you come on the base because I'd be made fun of. And I go, let me help you, man. Yeah, I go, let me help you, dude. And he hung up on me. And so I called from another phone and he answered. I go, dude, I got it. Let me help you. Let me at least try to help you. And he refused. So to this day, I don't know whether he got help or not. And it ate at me for like a couple months, and then I had to let it go. But that's probably the strangest story I ever got when it comes to the paranormal. So, people ask me all the time and go, what's scary? Bigfoot or paranormal? Paranormal is going to be the scariest all the time, because if you don't like Bigfoot, you can leave. You can go home.
Yes.
Paranormal can like attach to you and it can stay with you.
Yes, it can.
If you let it in. So to me, that question is always going to be paranormal. So,
yeah. And the demonic stuff can fill an empty vessel.
Yes. Yes. So, I mean, I get invited to go to a lot of investigations right now. And I tell people all the time, I said, look, I'm not strong enough right now to do anything. I would hurt your investigation if anything. And I don't want to do that. So I don't think that physically I'm strong enough to handle, something spiritual, like a spiritual war or whatever's there. Or I just try to give them help, but I do get invited a lot to go to them, but I have to turn it down like, most of the time.
You'll get there very soon.
Yeah.
Robert, I appreciate you coming onto the porch. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you would, please plug your social, any website that you may have, and share with the folks what you've got coming up.
Well, right now, I know I'm probably going to try to do something by the end of the year. Some episodes or something. So I was talking to most of the cast that are currently on the podcast right now about what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to be like plugging some stuff whenever we do start doing stuff. Whenever we do a podcast, I'm sorry. But right now, everybody can find us on any social media. It's Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. If you just type in Bigfoot Club, the number 1. And so if you just typed it in, you'll find our Instagram, and then you'll be able to find our tree link. And then we're on all the platforms. We're on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, Alexa. We're on everything. So, and if you have any, strange stories, if you need help, if you just need to talk to somebody, you can always reach out to me on email, and that's at BigfootClub, the number 1 @gmail.com.
Very good. Robert, once again, thank you. I want you to come back on the porch as often as you want to come back.
Yes, sir.
Because there's one thing that we didn't touch on.
Yeah.
What else cryptid do you research or are fascinated by other than Sasquatch?
Yeah, that's true. We
don't answer it.
I won't answer it.
We're going to save that for another episode.
Well, I appreciate coming on, man. I really love the show. I love your format. The Pass the Jar episode, I was laughing on that one so hard. That was making me laugh so hard. And the Dustin Sapp episode, that tore at my heart pretty good. That was a touchy one. And, I really love that episode.
I appreciate it. And I'm also a fan of your show as well. Terry Cagle is a fan of Bigfoot Club, and he is a subscriber.
I got to get you a shirt, man. What a size you wear?
You got a 5X? I
can get one made for you, brother.
You get me a 5X, I'll get you what size do you wear?
I used to wear a 2X. Now I'm in like just a large now.
I'll get you a large Porch Matters shirt. I'm actually thinking about getting some made anyway.
Okay.
So that right there gets me off the couch and gets me motivated. get some Porch Matters swag going.
Well, thank you for having me on, man. I really, really enjoyed it.
Same here. Thank you. Big thanks to Robert Dominguez of the Bigfoot Club for coming onto the porch. Find Bigfoot Club on your favorite podcast platform and on social media. Leave a comment saying you heard him on Porch Matters. If you are new to the show and like what you hear, hit that like, subscribe, or follow button and download the episodes in our archives. If this show has been a positive addition to your life, please rate the show and leave a review. Won't take you but a minute, and it really would help the show. Find us on social media by typing Porch Matters Podcast into the search bar. Word of mouth is still the best way of sharing. Pick your favorite episode and share it with at least one person this week. There are a lot of people out there that have never heard of a podcast before. I sure would appreciate it. And I'll see you next time, right here on Porch Matters.